I stood in the hallway, the copier buzzing faintly behind me, a holiday card trembling in my hand. The gold ribbon gleamed against the paper, mocking in its cheer, while my son's words echoed through the thin crack of the break room door. Just tell her not to come this year. Not to come. After raising him, after Christmas mornings built on stockings and burnt cinnamon rolls, after decades of love he never had to question, I was unwanted. So when the year-end bonus list crossed my desk, I didn't hesitate. His gift this year wasn't a bow or a card, it was nothing. We're about to begin, but if you'd like, share where you're joining from. It reminds me this story doesn't echo into silence. It lands somewhere real. Drop it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. The hum of the copier filled the silence in the break room, underscored by the faint scent of burnt coffee and lemon disinfectant. Diane paused by the mini fridge, her fingers still curled around the Diet Coke she'd just pulled. From the other side of the door, muffled voices filtered in, Jason's low and clipped, Heather's lighter, smug. Just tell her not to come this year, Jason said, casually, like he was suggesting a change to the playlist, not a person's presence. Heather chuckled. It's not like she adds anything. The world tilted slightly. Diane didn't move at first. Just stood there, one hand cold from the can, the other gripped around her office keycard. The door between them wasn't closed all the way. A thin line of light spilled into the darkened hallway where she stood, cloaked in silence. She stepped back without a sound. No gasp, no gasp, no dramatics. Just a quiet retreat into the static buzz of the copier behind her. Her heels didn't click, her chest didn't rise. Not yet. Let them think she hadn't heard a thing. Later that evening, the holiday card arrived, thick stock paper, gold foil edges. A snowy pine tree printed in soft watercolor, wrapped in a muted red ribbon. No signature, no note, no return address, though she recognized the stationery. Heather had used the same cards last year when things were still normal, before things curdled. She opened it at the kitchen counter, standing under the hum of the overhead fluorescent light, still in her work clothes, coat half on. The card trembled slightly as she held it. Nothing inside but a generic season's greetings printed in serif type. No invite, no party date, not even her name. She stared at it for a long time, her fingers pressed flat against the glossy surface as if willing ink to appear. As if the exclusion were just a clerical mistake, as if she hadn't already heard the truth through a crack in the door. The garbage can lid banged louder than she meant when she tossed the card in. By Monday morning, the walls of the office practically buzzed with festive gossip. Diane walked in with her usual calm, the one she'd spent years mastering. Smooth lipstick, straight spine, cardigan buttoned neatly over her blouse. The outer calm of someone used to being underestimated. At the front desk, Jason was laughing too loudly about flight delays and blacking out in Aspen if we're lucky. His Patagonia jacket still had the lift tag from last season dangling from the zipper. Diane kept walking. In the open workspace, someone had put on a Christmas playlist. Mariah Carey's voice dripped through the air like syrup, saccharine and inescapable. She sat at her desk, adjusted the keyboard, stared at her screen. Jason's voice floated over the cubicle wall. Airbnb's sick. 8 of us. Ski in, ski out. Fireplace, hot tub, the works. Heather chimed in with a practiced laugh. This year's gonna be even better. No drama. No drama. Right. Across the row, Sharon looked up from her monitor. Her eyes met Diane's and lingered. A flicker of something passed between them. Sympathy, maybe, or understanding too deep to name. You good? Sharon asked quietly, like someone offering a hand from the other side of a cracked sidewalk. Diane smiled, the kind that used only half her mouth. Of course, she said. Why wouldn't I be? but her knuckles were white against the coffee mug she hadn't even realized she was holding. That night, alone in her apartment, she poured herself a glass of red wine and stared out the window at the quiet street. Snow was starting to fall, fine and slow, blurring the Christmas lights strung along the neighbor's balcony. Behind her, the holiday card lay in the trash beneath a crumpled paper towel and the plastic wrap from a frozen meal. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. But her hand hovered over her phone for a long time. Then slowly, deliberately, she opened her laptop instead, logged into a tab she hadn't touched since last year, and began to type. The pine needles bit into her palms as she tugged the artificial tree from its box. A few old tinsel strands clung stubbornly to the branches from last year, glittering weakly in the living room's dim light. Diane set the base down, twisted the metal stand into place, and pulled the branches out one by one. The house was too quiet. No music, no chatter. Just the rhythmic rustle of plastic pine limbs unfolding. She used to hate how Jason insisted on blasting Springsteen's Christmas album while decorating, said it balanced out all the sentimental crap. Now she almost missed his off-key mumbling over "Santa Claus is coming to town." Almost. Her hands moved slowly but surely, assembling the tree with methodical care, like it was a puzzle she was determined to solve without glancing at the picture on the box. Halfway through, she reached into a storage bin and unwrapped an old ornament, a red felt mitten with a crooked white cuff and glitter-glued initials, JT. The stitching was coming loose at the top. She sat back on her heels, holding it between her fingers. Jason had made it in 3rd grade. His mother gave it to them one Christmas, said it was too sweet to keep boxed away. Diane remembered how she'd hung it near the top that year, wanting it to catch the best light. Jason laughed at her, called it ridiculous, but he didn't move it. Now she placed it low, near the base, out of sight. When she plugged in the string lights, the tree lit up in soft yellows and cool whites, casting gentle shadows against the wall, but something about it looked unfinished, as if the glow only emphasized who wasn't there. The doorbell rang. She blinked, then crossed the living room and opened it. Margot stood on the other side, bundled in a navy pea coat and holding a small bakery box in one hand and a thermos in the other. Her breath puffed out in clouds. "Thought you might be in a mood," she said, stepping inside without waiting. "So I came armed." Diane managed a half smile. "I thought you had dinner with Charlie tonight." Margot shrugged off her coat. "He can eat leftovers. You needed sugar more." In the kitchen, Margot opened the box to reveal fresh gingerbread, still warm, soft around the edges, and poured peppermint cocoa into mismatched mugs. Diane inhaled the scent, the mix of cinnamon and mint curling through the room like something tender and nostalgic. "I didn't know if I even wanted to do the tree this year," Diane admitted, easing onto the couch. "But you did." Half-heartedly. Margot passed her a mug. "You know you don't owe anyone a Merry Christmas." Diane stared at the tree. The lights flickered slightly. Her voice, when it came, was smaller than she expected. "He doesn't want me there." It wasn't a question. Margot didn't flinch. She leaned back, cupped her mug between both hands. "Then don't give him anything either. Not your presence, not your silence, not your pain." Diane said nothing. Margot glanced at the tree. "It's lovely, by the way, even if he didn't help." She rose to leave, zipping up her coat. "Decorate for yourself. Or don't. But don't do it for ghosts." After the door closed behind her, Diane sat in the hush of the room, cocoa cooling in her hands. She looked again at the tree, at the uneven glow, at the felt mitten tucked in the shadows. She rose and unplugged the lights, then walked to the hall closet, pulled down a box she hadn't opened in years, one labeled in Jason's handwriting, "Old stuff. Keep. Maybe." Inside were things he'd asked her to deal with someday. college notebooks, expired passports, a folder of family photos. She sifted through them with a kind of clinical detachment, and at the bottom, wrapped in yellowed tissue, was something she hadn't known he'd kept. A printed email, creased down the center. Her name in the subject line. Dated 5 years ago, forwarded from his personal account. She unfolded it with care and read the first sentence. Her face went blank, then still. The blinds in Sharon's office were drawn halfway, letting in a weak slice of morning sun that hit the edge of her desk like a spotlight. Diane stepped inside and closed the door behind her with deliberate calm. Sharon didn't look up right away. She was reviewing a spreadsheet, the corner of her mouth tight with focus. I went over the numbers twice, she said, tapping a manicured nail against her tablet. Still doesn't feel right. Diane stayed standing. A second passed, then another. Finally, Sharon turned the tablet toward her. Proposed year-end bonuses. Final draft. Unless you want changes. Diane stepped forward. Heels quiet against the carpet. She scanned the names quickly until her eyes caught on one. Jason Teller, $14,500, the highest on the list. By a margin. She didn't speak, just stared at the number. Her face gave nothing away. Sharon watched her carefully. I know he's senior, and his Q4 numbers were strong, on paper. But with the turnover and the HR complaint last summer. She paused. You asked me to keep you looped in on the final call? Diane reached for a pen from the desk. She circled Jason's name once. Clean. Precise. Remove him, she said. Sharon blinked. You mean, adjust? No. Diane looked up, her voice low but steady. I mean erase him from the bonus pool entirely. Sharon leaned back in her chair. Her eyes narrowed slightly, but not in judgment, just calculation. That'll raise questions. Diane didn't flinch. Let them ask. He'll push back. Then he can push. There was a beat of silence between them. Sharon's gaze drifted to the drawn blinds, the streak of sunlight on the desk. She clicked her pen shut. Completely? She asked, quieter this time. Diane's hand settled on the edge of the desk. Not clenched, not shaking, just anchored. Not a penny, she said. Not this year. For a moment, all that moved was the cursor blinking on Sharon's screen. Then she nodded. Once. Understood. Diane turned to leave but paused at the door, fingers resting on the knob. You remember that team off-site 3 years ago? She said, without turning around. Sharon looked up. The Napa retreat? No, Diane said. The one before. Colorado. Snowstorm weekend. Oh, yeah. Barely made it out of the hotel. Diane nodded slowly. Jason told me the Wi-Fi was down, that he couldn't reach me for 2 days. Sharon hesitated. I remember you saying that. Diane turned her head slightly. Funny. I found an email last night. Sharon sat up straighter. From who? Diane's smile didn't reach her eyes. Not important. She opened the door and stepped out, letting it close behind her with a soft click. Back at her desk, Diane opened a new spreadsheet. She deleted Jason's line first. Then she began to reorganize the rest of the bonus pool, reallocating funds with clinical precision. Sharon was right. People would notice. But not in the way they expected. She paused on Heather's name. Her mouse hovered, then moved on. Across the office, Jason was at the snack bar, scooping pretzels into a paper cup, still in his ski trip hoodie, bragging to someone from accounting about how he'd single-handedly saved Q4. He didn't glance her way. Didn't know. Not yet. Diane's phone buzzed. A text from Margot. How did it feel? She typed back, like I finally took my hand off the brakes. Then she closed the spreadsheet and opened the email again. The one Jason had printed and buried like a rotten seed. She read it twice more. then downloaded every attachment. Each one had a name, each one had a date, and not a single one of them matched what he told her. The conference room still smelled faintly of dry erase markers and the peppermint air freshener someone had overcommitted to before the holiday party that Jason never showed up to. Diane stood at the whiteboard, sleeves pushed back just enough to show control, not stress. Across the table, Sharon tapped through a PDF on her tablet, pausing on the final section. "You're sure you want to change the language this close to rollout?" she asked, not looking up. "Legal might raise flags." Diane clicked the cap back onto a dry erase marker and turned. "It's not a change, it's a clarification," she said, walking over to Sharon and setting a printed copy in front of her. The page was crisp, ink still smelling faintly of toner. Under the updated section titled Bonus Eligibility Criteria, one line had been added. Eligibility requires verified participation in year-end team events and documented engagement in leadership-hosted initiatives. Sharon raised an eyebrow, but didn't challenge it. "This isn't just about him, is it?" Diane gave a cool, almost imperceptible smile. "It's about setting a standard. We reward presence, not just numbers." Jason's not the only one who forgot that. Sharon flipped to the appendix Diane had attached, a retroactive memo from 2 weeks ago. Typed, signed, dated. Jason had skipped the holiday party, and he'd ignored the leadership workshop Diane hosted on the first Friday of December, claimed a conflict that never appeared on his calendar. "Both events were optional," Sharon said carefully. "Optional for attendees," Diane replied. "Not for managers." That landed. Sharon exhaled slowly, then nodded. "I'll include the memo and circulate the letters today." As Sharon gathered the packets into a manila envelope, Diane walked to the far window. Downtown shimmered below, early snowmelt glittering on windshields, holiday lights still blinking against grim winter skies. She watched two people cross the street arm in arm, laughing about something the wind stole before she could hear. Something tightened in her chest, then loosened just as quickly. An hour later, back at her desk, Diane sipped lukewarm tea and watched her inbox refresh. One by one, digital signatures came in. Jared, Mia, Eloise, Sharon herself. Jason's line stayed blank. Of course it did. Across the bullpen, he was pacing by the copier on a call with his back to her. Loud, animated, hand gestures like punctuation marks. Still playing the part. Still assuming the rules didn't apply to him. Her office door was open. She left it that way on purpose. "Final copies are in," Sharon said, stepping inside with the signed packet. "I filed the new policy and memo to HR for audit trail." Diane took it from her, eyes scanning the first few pages again, even though she already knew what they said. Sharon hesitated before turning to go. "You sure you're up for the leadership review next month? It's going to get political." Diane didn't flinch. "Let it." The door had barely closed when a knock landed behind it. Caleb. Late 20s, data team. Kind, overly caffeinated, perpetually in sneakers. "Hey," he said, stepping just inside the doorway. "Didn't mean to bug, just walking by and, you looked like you were about to start a small fire." Diane laughed. Real this time. Sharp, but not cruel. "No fire," she said, setting down the packet. "Just clarity." Caleb tilted his head. "You okay, boss?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached for the folder again, laid her palm flat against the sealed envelope like it might pulse under her touch. Her voice, when it came, was quieter than she meant it to be, but stronger than she expected. "Better than I've been in weeks." Caleb nodded slowly, like he didn't totally understand, but trusted her enough not to ask. She waited until he left, then opened her desk drawer, pulled out the folder she hadn't shown Sharon yet. The printed emails were neatly tabbed now, a small stack of them. And beneath those, a photo. From Colorado. Jason. Not snowed in. Not alone. Arms slung around a woman Diane had never seen before. A date printed at the bottom. December 15th, 2020. She'd been home with the flu. He'd brought her soup. Kissed her forehead. Told her he missed her so much it hurt. The sun blazed against the frosted window panes of the ski lodge, casting dagger-shaped light across the stone fireplace and a leather duffel half unzipped on the floor. Jason Teller sat cross-legged on the edge of a deep couch, MacBook open, fingers drumming against the keyboard as the resort's Wi-Fi spun uselessly. He refreshed the portal again. Nothing. The year-end bonus should have hit by now. He'd counted on it. Had already paid the deposit on a ridiculous heli-skiing package for February and tipped a bartender last night like a man with money to burn. He clicked the banking tab again. Still nothing. A quiet tension began crawling up his spine. He opened his company dashboard, checked his deposit history, cross-referenced it with the bonus distribution calendar that had gone out last week. Everyone else had received theirs. Everyone who mattered. 500 miles away, Diane sat behind her desk, calm and still as fresh snowfall. The only sound in her office was the soft tick of the wall clock and the muffled ring of her desk phone vibrating against its cradle. She didn't reach for it. Sharon's voice came through her open door instead, flat and even. "He's online too." Diane raised an eyebrow. "You want me to take it?" Sharon shook her head. "Not yet." She picked up the receiver like she was lifting a paperweight. "This is Sharon." On the other end, Jason's voice snapped, sharp and immediate. "Yeah, hi, there's been a mistake. I logged into the portal and I don't see my bonus. There's no deposit pending. That's not right, is it?" Sharon pulled the file from the stack in front of her. "No mistake," she said simply. "Per the updated eligibility policy, you were disqualified." There was a pause. Not stunned silence, but an inhale just before the explosion. "What the hell are you talking about?" Jason barked. "I earned that. I closed 4 major accounts in Q4. I hit every sales target." Sharon's voice didn't waver. "This year's criteria required documented engagement in year-end events and leadership initiatives. You didn't attend either." Jason's scoff was audible through the handset. "Since when? That was never part of the requirements." "Since the clarification memo," Sharon replied, dated December 8th, signed by senior leadership. "You were copied on it." "No, I wasn't," he snapped. "You were." A pause. Then, a sharp exhale. Jason's voice dropped, coiled now, simmering. "Okay, fine. I see what this is. You think you can cut me out over office politics? I'll take it to legal." "You know I will." Sharon didn't flinch. "You're welcome to. I've got years of performance history. You think you can just erase that with a memo?" Sharon's voice softened, but not out of sympathy. "You should check your inbox." There was a long silence. Then the line clicked dead. She hung up quietly and looked across the room. Diane's expression hadn't changed. "What did he say?" Diane asked, finally turning her monitor slightly away. "Same thing all entitled men say when you take away something they assumed was theirs." Diane leaned back. "Did he threaten a lawsuit?" "Of course." "Perfect." She opened her email and attached the memo, official letterhead, time-stamped, fully signed, to a new message addressed to Jason. Beneath it, she included the HR confirmation thread from earlier that morning, along with the calendar invite he'd declined 2 weeks ago for the leadership forum. Subject line: "Per your call. Message body. As discussed, please find the attached documentation outlining eligibility terms and participation records. Best, Diane." She didn't reread it, just hit send. Back at the lodge, Jason stood motionless in front of the panoramic windows, phone still in hand. Outside, skiers cut down the distant slopes like flecks of static against the powder. His email dinged. He opened the attachment. His name, his absence, his signature acknowledging receipt. All there. The lump in his throat tasted like blood. He threw the phone hard enough to crack against the fireplace stone. It didn't shatter, but it screamed its way down to the floor, screen glowing spitefully up at him. Behind him, someone in the dining room laughed. It sounded like Diane used to, when she still liked him. Back in the office, Diane received a new message. Not from Jason, from HR. Subject: Compliance Review Follow-Up Body. We've begun reviewing the documentation you submitted. Would you be available to discuss discrepancies in Jason Teller's personnel file? She didn't smile, but her pulse, for the first time in days, felt calm. The photo popped up on Diane's screen just as she finished her second round of HR documentation. Heather Wren, new post. The preview image was soft and pink-tinted, a ski slope behind 3 figures bundled in coordinated Patagonia. Jason, Heather, and a little girl no older than 6, front and center, cheeks pink from cold and grinning into a snowball. Caption: Just the 3 of us this year. Aspen was magic. No tags, no filters, just curated domestic bliss. Diane stared at it for 3 full seconds, blinked, and closed the tab. There was no spike in her chest, no ache behind the ribs. Only a clean, almost clinical awareness. She'd never seen that child before. And Heather wasn't a single aunt babysitting. Down the hall, Sharon stood on a small ladder, trying to hang a glittery gold ribbon across the top of the office tree without tipping over. "Higher!" Caleb called from below, arms crossed like a skeptical stage manager. "I swear to God, if I fall and die, you're doing my exit interview," Sharon muttered. Diane walked in, still holding a stapled copy of HR's case notes, and paused. "You need a third person for that to qualify as OSHA non-compliant." Sharon glanced down. "Good. Stay there. Spot me." Diane dropped the report on the nearby credenza and walked over. She steadied the ladder with one hand and gestured to Caleb. "If she cracks her tailbone, you're writing the eulogy." "Already writing it in my head," Caleb replied. "Starts with, 'She died how she lived,' correcting everyone else's font choices." Sharon barked a laugh, then stepped down from the ladder. The tree looked surprisingly decent. A little crooked, a little overdecorated, but warm. Caleb turned to Diane, almost shy. "Got you something." He held out a small square box, poorly wrapped in printer paper and sealed with duct tape. Diane raised an eyebrow. "Should I be afraid?" "Only of how cool it makes you look." She peeled it open and pulled out a plain white coffee mug. Block letters across the front read, "Company Santa." On the back, "Caffeine, compliance, consequences." She laughed, full and real. It cracked open in her chest before she could stop it. Not a polite chuckle, not the tight, careful grin she wore for so long. This one echoed off the ceiling tiles. Sharon and Caleb exchanged a glance, almost startled. "That," Margot said, stepping into the room with a paper bag in hand, "is the sound of healing." She crossed over and handed Diane a warm wax bag that smelled like cinnamon and citrus. "Cranberry scones," Margot said, "fresh and festive." Diane took the bag, still smiling. "I didn't ask for any of this." "Exactly," Margot said, pulling up a chair and kicking off her heels. "You earned it by surviving a boardroom of men who thought empathy was a brand of mattress." Sharon dropped onto the arm of the couch. "And by rewriting a bonus policy with the precision of a Supreme Court clerk." Diane leaned back, cradling the company's Santa mug. The office around her felt different today. Not softer, but sturdier. Like it had adjusted to fit the version of her that wasn't shrinking anymore. Her phone buzzed. Another HR email. Subject: Next Steps. Jason Teller file review, plus historical audit. She didn't open it right away. Instead, she bit into a scone. The tart cranberry burst across her tongue, followed by the buttery crumble of the dough. Warm, bright, real. For the first time in a long time, the taste didn't remind her of anything. It just existed. Present. Uncomplicated. She looked up. The tree blinked. Caleb was putting the star on top. Sharon handed out candy canes like they were medals. Margot was asking someone about flights to Charleston. Diane sat in the middle of it all and didn't feel like a ghost. At the ski lodge, Heather closed her phone and turned toward Jason. "You didn't tell me she knew?" she said quietly. Jason didn't answer, just reached for another beer he hadn't paid for. The office was quiet. Mid-morning lull. Just the soft clatter of keyboards, the hum of a shared heater clicking on and off. Diane had just returned from the printer when her phone lit up. Jason Teller incoming call. External. She stared at the screen for a moment, then picked up. Diane Fairchild. His voice came in like static soaked in venom. "You humiliated me." She blinked once, slowly. "Good morning to you too. You embarrassed me in front of my wife." His words hissed like steam from a cracked pipe. "You couldn't just keep this professional?" "I did," she replied, tone even. "You just didn't recognize what that looks like." "You blindsided me." "I sent 3 memos, Jason. You acknowledged all of them. Don't mistake ignored for blindsided." A pause. Breathing. Then, "You don't get it," he snapped. She saw everything. The memo, the disqualification, the audit. "You dragged my name through the mud in front of someone I—" He cut off, regrouping. "She doesn't know everything. You just handed her ammo." Diane glanced toward the hallway window. Snow was falling again. A fine, steady curtain over the skyline. Calm, clean. "I didn't embarrass you," she said, voice low but unflinching. "You did that yourself." There was a silence on the other end that didn't feel like surrender. It felt like a fuse, burning. "You're really enjoying this, aren't you?" "No," Diane said. "I'm just not apologizing for it." Jason's laugh was short and sharp. "You think this makes you look strong?" "I don't need to look anything," she said. "I just need to lead a team that deserves better than what you gave." A chair creaked softly outside her door. Sharon, standing just out of view, one arm folded, the other wrapped around a coffee mug. Listening. Jason's voice dropped into a hiss. "If this is your idea of professional payback, it's pathetic. Jason, you can spin this however you need to sleep at night. But what happened here isn't revenge, it's consequences." "Maybe I should just walk," he snapped. "Quit. Today." Diane didn't pause. "You're welcome to." The silence this time felt colder. He hadn't expected her to call the bluff. "I've given that company 10 years, he said, voice cracking around the edges. "Built most of that pipeline myself. You also undermined 3 different team leads, skipped leadership events, and lied to my face about a retreat you were never alone on." "You went digging." "No," she said. "You buried the wrong things." Footsteps echoed faintly down the hall. Someone laughed near the water cooler. Life went on, even while Jason unraveled over the phone. "I'll go to legal." "Then go. You don't get to win like this." Diane leaned back in her chair and finally allowed herself a deep breath. "I didn't win anything," she said. "I just stopped pretending you hadn't already lost." The line stayed quiet, not hung up, just heavy. "You know what's sad, Jason?" she added, voice quieter now. "You thought getting caught would be the worst part. But the truth is, being seen clearly always was." She ended the call, didn't wait for a reply, didn't care if he screamed on the other end. The moment her finger tapped end, she sat still. 1 beat. Then 2. Outside the door, Sharon stepped in, holding her mug like a gavel. I take it he's not sending a holiday card this year. Diane smiled faintly. Or ever again. You good? I am. Sharon took a seat without being asked. If he walks, it's not your problem. No, Diane said, but I'll make sure HR knows what not to rehire. Sharon chuckled, then sipped. And Diane? She reached for her company Santa mug, poured herself a fresh cup of coffee, and opened the email titled Personnel File Archive, Discrepancies, Phase 2. The boardroom smelled faintly of leather and legal pads, expensive, over-polished, and utterly impersonal. 11 chairs, 8 filled, 1 vacant, the seat at the head of the table. Diane didn't take it. She stood. In front of the screen, a sleek black clicker in her hand, a minimalist presentation already glowing behind her. Q4 discrepancy audit plus policy compliance review. Subtitle, requested emergency session, authorized by executive ops. No music, no preamble, just white light and truth. I appreciate you all joining on short notice, she began, voice even but resonant. What I'm presenting today involves personnel compliance, fiduciary risk, and a breach of leadership standards by a senior team member. Before she could advance to slide 2, the boardroom door opened. Jason walked in, slightly out of breath, eyes darting. No suit, just a cashmere quarter zip, and the rattled ego of a man who hadn't expected to be summoned this way. He didn't sit. I wasn't notified this was happening, he said, ignoring the stares from around the table. You were, Diane replied, without looking at him. Via official calendar invite, marked urgent. Read receipt logged at 9:42 a.m. He opened his mouth, then shut it. Shall we continue? The chairman, an older man with tortoise-shell glasses and a deep love for protocol, gave her a single nod. Slide 2 clicked on. It was a timeline, timestamps, memos, forwarded receipts, signatures. Over the past 6 weeks, Diane said, policy updates were submitted, reviewed, and unanimously approved by the HR Advisory Council. All communications were sent to leadership with ample time for questions or concerns. None were raised. Jason laughed under his breath. Oh, come on, he muttered. This is political theater. She's targeting me because of a personal disagreement. The chairman frowned. Is that an accusation of misconduct? Jason held up both hands. I'm saying it's a conflict of interest. You don't pull someone's bonus and initiate a file audit in the same quarter unless you're trying to force them out. Diane didn't flinch. I didn't initiate the audit. HR did. Based on flagged discrepancies in your signed documentation from the 2020 and 2021 retreat records. Slide 3. A scanned form. Jason's signature. Dates altered by hand. And for the record, Diane added, turning to face him fully, I didn't remove your bonus. You did that by failing to meet engagement criteria outlined in a memo you acknowledged. You were the only executive absent from both required events. I had valid reasons, none of which were submitted, per policy. Silence. Jason's shoulders stiffened, jaw twitching. You're making this personal. Diane turned back to the board. This isn't personal. It's professional. And overdue. She clicked to the final slide. Board motion, formal recognition of policy enforcement. Affirmation of eligibility criteria. It was already drafted, already circulated. The signatures were waiting. I'm asking for a vote of confidence in the updates, the enforcement actions, and the audit currently underway. If the board supports the motion, we'll proceed with final HR findings next quarter. Jason looked around, eyes scanning faces for support. None came. One by one, hands raised. First the chairman, then Eloise, then Ravi, then Mark. Unanimous. No hesitation. Jason sat, finally, but not with control, with disbelief. like someone just informed him the rules of gravity had changed overnight. "This is still my company," he said, quieter now but venom curling under the words. Diane stepped forward. "No," she said. "It was. But companies aren't inherited. They're upheld." She let that hang for a moment. "And if you don't recognize what that looks like anymore, you've already resigned." The silence that followed wasn't just quiet. It was loaded. Final. Jason looked down at the polished table, saw his own reflection in it, and didn't like what stared back. Later, alone in her office, Diane poured herself a glass of water with hands that didn't shake anymore. A single notification pinged on her screen. HR. Final audit docs plus external disclosures. Confidential. She opened the file. Line 1. Jason Teller falsified annual disclosures for 3 consecutive years. Line 2. Undisclosed conflict of interest. Vendor kickbacks via third-party partnership. Line 3. Recommended next steps. Termination pending legal review. She sat back, took a long breath, and finally opened the folder she'd been building quietly since last December, titled simply Contingency. It started as a number, a subtle, unflagged change deep in the December payroll cycle. A $7,500 bump tucked into the executive adjustment line for Department 3A. Jason's department. Sharon caught it first. She'd been cross-referencing salary histories for an end-of-year compliance report when the figure lit up red in her spreadsheet. Not an official raise. Not even a documented approval trail. Just a change slipped into the system by someone with administrative-level access. "Tell me I'm hallucinating," she said, stepping into Diane's office, tablet in hand. Diane was mid-call with HR. She looked up, took the tablet, and scanned the line item. Her expression didn't change, but her tone did. "I'll call you back," she told the HR lead. Click. Her fingers moved fast. She logged into the payroll portal, accessed the executive-level edit log, and found it. A time-stamped submission made at 2:13 a.m. by Jason's login credentials. No supporting documents, no memo, no bonus eligibility form. It wasn't an error. It was a last-ditch theft. Diane canceled the change, revoked Jason's portal access, and updated the audit flag in HR's internal control system. Then she opened a new document. Subject: Unauthorized compensation adjustment, final written warning recipient. Jason Teller, CC, HR Director, Payroll Compliance, Legal Counsel. She didn't editorialize. Just the facts, attachments, screenshots, policy references, a final paragraph that read like a verdict. Any future attempt to alter compensation without formal approval will result in immediate termination for cause. No further warnings will be issued. She hit send, then locked the document behind two-step encryption and a read receipt trail. By noon, Heather had taken to Instagram again. A blurry photo of a wine glass, captioned in swirling script. Some families feed off love, others feed off each other. Chuck, stay tuned. Chuck not bitter just done. Diane saw it while waiting for a shared doc to load. Margot had texted the screenshot with a single line. "Your girl's unraveling." Diane didn't reply. Just set her phone down and sighed through her nose. The whole thing had grown exhausting. Not in a dramatic way, but in the bone-deep, second-hand kind of way that came from watching people orchestrate their own collapse and still insist they were victims of sabotage. Sharon peeked in around the doorway. "Heather posting nonsense again?" "Always," Diane said. "Apparently, she's spiritually allergic to accountability." Sharon smirked. "You want me to screenshot and file it? Just in case?" Diane shook her head. "No, I'm done playing whack-a-mole with emotionally unstable Instagram quotes." She turned her chair back toward her screen, rereading the formal warning in her outbox. This wasn't petty anymore. It was procedural. The end wasn't loud. It wasn't messy. It was methodical. The way rot was removed from a support beam without taking the whole house down. She reached into her drawer, pulled out the contingency folder again, and slid in one final printed page. Jason's falsified raise attempt. Timestamp and all. There was no satisfaction in it. No high. Just peace. Cold and clean. That night, Heather posted again. A black and white close-up of a torn wedding photo. Only Jason's shoulder was visible. The caption, "Some people can't tell the difference between leadership and control. That's their tragedy." Margot called this time. She's going nuclear. Diane stood by the window of her apartment, wine in hand, the city glittering below like a map of decisions she no longer regretted. "She's welcome too," Diane said. "She's airing it out to over 1,300 followers." Diane sipped. "Then I hope they enjoy the show." She hung up before Margot could answer, and finally, opened the next document in the HR audit queue. Jason Teller, final review, legal risk scenarios, plus severance exposure. She clicked open. The scent of cinnamon and fresh pine filled the office before anyone even hit the second floor. Sharon had brought in 2 crockpots, one full of cider, the other bubbling with slow-cooked French toast. Margot had lit a pine-scented candle that was probably against fire code, and Diane, for the first time in years, had baked. Real cookies. Sugar-dusted and slightly crooked. It was Christmas Eve. And the only people here were the ones who wanted to be. They'd shut the phones off. No meetings, no laptops. Just a long table covered in mismatched mugs, a dozen wrapped white elephant gifts, and the kind of calm you couldn't fake. Caleb arrived last, but only because his dog needed help with the costume. The golden retriever trotted in like he owned the place, wearing a tiny red vest with white trim and a paper sign that read, "Chief Paw Operations Officer." A plush Santa hat hung sideways on one ear. Everyone applauded like a celebrity had entered. Diane knelt down to pet him, laughing as he licked powdered sugar off her wrist. "This is illegal levels of cute," she said. "HR cleared him for 1 day only," Caleb said. "He's union now." They broke into carols after coffee. Sharon printed out the lyrics like it was an old-fashioned choir rehearsal. Margot refused to sing anything before Mariah. Caleb led Jingle Bell Rock like it was a TED Talk. Diane didn't sing, but she hummed and smiled. A lot. An hour in, just as they were unwrapping joke gifts, Sharon got socks that said, "I'm not bossy, I'm right." Diane noticed a small, flat box pushed toward her. No tag, just green paper and a red ribbon. She looked up. Sharon raised her mug in a tiny toast. "Go on." Inside was a photo, framed in matte black wood. It was the staff, taken that morning. Caleb mid-laugh. Sharon pretending to strangle Margot with tinsel. Everyone beaming, the tree glowing behind them. In the center of it all, Diane. Looking happy. Unposed. Alive. She stared at it for a moment longer than she meant to. Then she blinked. Once. Twice. And quietly, without apology, wiped at the corner of one eye. "It's not a memorial," Sharon teased gently. "I know," Diane said, voice soft. "It's just been a long time since I felt part of something I didn't have to carry alone." Margot touched her arm. "You built it. But you didn't do it for yourself. That's the difference." Diane nodded once, lips tight, then exhaled through a smile. "All right," she said, composing herself. "Let's toast before someone puts on 'Little Drummer Boy' and ruins the mood." Caleb raised his mug first. "To the boss who never stopped caring." The others followed. "To the boss." "To Diane." Glasses clinked, coffee splashed. Someone yelled, "Speech!" and Diane threw a napkin at them. Later, when most had left and the lights were lower, Diane stayed behind to finish the cider and put the last few chairs back. She didn't mind the quiet. She liked it now. She stood by the window, the photo still in her hand, and watched snow begin to fall in slow, lazy flakes. Somewhere across town, Jason was probably sulking through a silent dinner, Heather posting more barbed poetry into the void. But that wasn't her concern anymore. Not her weight to carry. Not her story to fix. Her phone buzzed. A text from Sharon. "You okay, boss?" Diane smiled and typed back. "Better than I've been in years." Just as she hit send, a new email pinged into her inbox. From Legal Counsel. Subject: Ari, Final Action. Jason Teller Termination Package Approval. She didn't open it yet. She just stared at it. Not with nerves, not with vengeance, but with the stillness of someone who knew exactly what came next and had planned for it. She reached for her coat and left the light on behind her. Jason's resignation came in at 6:04 a.m. No salutation, no explanation, just a two-line email with a poorly cropped company logo in the signature. Effective immediately, I am resigning from my position. I expect standard severance terms to be processed accordingly. Diane read it while sipping black coffee in her kitchen, the city outside still wrapped in pre-dawn stillness. The email glowed on her phone. Detached. Entitled, Predictable. She tapped reply, typed one word, noted, hit send, and didn't think about it again until 8:30 when Sharon rolled in holding a manila envelope and a large iced coffee. "Confirmed?" Sharon asked. Diane nodded. He pulled the trigger. Sharon slid the envelope onto the desk. "Here's the full exit packet. NDA, asset return checklist, no rehire clause. Legal says we don't even have to offer a severance, especially after the audit findings." "We won't. Want me to send it?" "No," Diane said. "I'll send it." She opened a blank email and attached the documents. Subject: Exit process, final documents. Enclosed body: Jason. Attached are the required forms to finalize your departure. Please review and return within 72 hours. Diane. No warmth, no filler, just structure. Within 10 minutes, her phone buzzed. An incoming call. Jason Teller. She didn't answer. A voicemail arrived instead. She waited, then hit play. His voice was clipped but controlled. That careful mix of legal awareness and male fragility. "I don't think we need to make this hostile, Diane. I'm willing to be flexible. We can talk terms. I contributed a lot to that company. You and I both know what I'm worth." She deleted the message. 5 minutes later, a follow-up email arrived. "Given my years of service and revenue contributions, I expect the standard 3-month executive severance outlined in the 2020 handbook." Diane typed slowly, carefully. Subject: Severance Eligibility Response Body. Jason, you were not terminated. You resigned. Per your contract and the findings of HR's audit, your year-end bonus, had it been approved, would have served as your discretionary separation compensation. As you know, it was not approved. No further payments will be issued. Diane she CC'd legal, then hit send. By lunch, Caleb had already updated the team directory on the website. Jason's headshot was gone. His name stripped from the executive page, titles realigned. The vacant slot beneath Diane's name now read, "Currently under review, interim leadership appointments pending." Sharon stood behind him, watching the updates live. "Feels cleaner already," she said. Caleb nodded. "It's like taking expired milk out of the fridge. You didn't realize how much it stank until it was gone." Down the hall, Diane stood in the print room, alone, rereading Jason's resignation one last time. She wasn't gloating. She wasn't even relieved. She was clear, like something heavy had been removed, but the space it left behind wasn't a wound. It was potential. That evening, Margot forwarded Diane a listing from a luxury resale site. It was Heather's, a Givenchy satchel, then a Valentino clutch, Then a pair of Louboutins she'd worn to last year's gala. All tagged, like new, authentic, final sale. Margot texted beneath the screenshots. Guess Aspen wasn't fully refundable. Diane didn't respond. She just closed the thread and poured herself a glass of wine. Not celebration wine, just end of a long road wine. An hour later, another email landed. Subject: RE. Jason Teller exit interview declined. HR closure filed status. Final. She read it, filed it, and opened her calendar. 1 week until the leadership summit. 2 weeks until the new year. Her desk was clean, her conscience cleaner, but the contingency folder was still locked in her drawer, untouched. For now. She stared at it, then picked up her pen, and wrote one word on a fresh notepad. Legacy. The demolition crew arrived on a Thursday morning, quiet, efficient, and shockingly fast. By noon, the frosted glass door that once read Jason Teller, Chief Financial Officer, was gone. So was the nameplate, the espresso machine, the framed photo of him shaking hands with a governor no one could name. In its place, a long butcher block table, 6 chairs on wheels, and a new sign stenciled on the wall in navy serif. The Numbers Room, a collaborative space for future finance leads. Diane stood at the doorway with Caleb, sipping a smoothie from a company-logoed tumbler. "You're sure about the name?" he asked, watching the painters do final touch-ups. "It's literal," Diane said, "and humble. The anti-corner office." He nodded slowly. "Feels good." "Feels honest," she said. "That's better." The entire executive floor had changed. Gone were the private lounges, the tinted glass, the exclusive elevators no one else could use. In their place, a communal library with rotating staff recommendations, a wellness nook with actual plants, and a rotating seat at every leadership meeting for junior associates. It had taken weeks of surveys, hallway chats, whiteboard sessions in the break room. It didn't feel like bureaucracy. It felt like repair. That afternoon, Diane held the first session of the new mentorship program in the freshly converted Numbers Room. 12 young accountants, equal split of men and women, half of them first-generation college grads, all of them curious, sharp, and watching her with the kind of attention Jason used to mistake for admiration, but Diane knew better. It was trust and hunger. She opened with a whiteboard marker and a story about a failed audit from 2009. By the second laugh, the room relaxed. By the end, one of them asked how she actually got through to board members during a scandal without losing her voice. She just tapped the marker against the board and said, "No more than they expect. Speak less than they deserve. And keep receipts." Later, Sharon wheeled in a large, velvet-covered box wrapped in gold ribbon. "For your throne," she announced, sliding it across the hall into Diane's office. Diane raised an eyebrow. "You bought me a chair?" "Not just any chair," Sharon said, unwrapping it with a flourish. It was dramatic. Red velvet with gold trim, high-backed and ridiculously regal. "This belongs in a Wes Anderson movie," Diane said, grinning. "Exactly," Sharon replied. "All that quiet competence of yours? It needed a little flair." Diane ran her hand over the velvet. "It's too much. You're too much. And it's the holidays." They both laughed, then stood beside the tree Caleb had insisted on putting up for energy balance. Sharon snapped a few selfies on her phone, Diane laughing, holding a candy cane like a microphone. "We should get one framed," Sharon said. "Only if we crop out the chair." "Nope, chair stays." Outside the Numbers Room, Caleb updated the company org chart to reflect his new title. Acting CFO. The mouse hovered over the save button for a long second. He clicked. A new page loaded. Jason's name was nowhere. At 5:45, Diane turned off her desk lamp and stood alone in the new open hallway. watching the last bits of sunlight stretch across the freshly painted walls. No nameplates, no trophies, just light. Her phone buzzed. A private message from Margot. Guess who just applied for a junior advisory role at our competitor? Jason, with no references. Diane typed back. Legacy takes many forms. Then turned her phone face down. She walked down the hallway, the red velvet chair catching a glint of gold in the corner of her eye, and past the numbers room just as the last mentee was leaving. The young woman smiled. Thanks again, Ms. Fairchild. Just Diane, she said. Always, just Diane. The girl nodded. See you next session. She disappeared down the stairs, and for a moment the building was still. Not silent, just new. The cafe was tucked between a dry cleaner and a used bookstore. One of those places you wouldn't notice unless you were looking for it. Mismatched chairs, soft jazz humming through the speakers, and a handwritten sign that said cash preferred, but kindness required. Diane arrived 5 minutes early. She didn't take off her coat, just ordered a black tea, unsweetened, and chose a table by the window. The December sun made everything outside look cleaner than it was. Jason showed up 7 minutes late. No jacket, just a faded gray sweater and khakis that no longer looked like they belonged to an executive. His hair was longer, unkempt. His posture was still upright, but there was a visible slump in his eyes. A man used to taking space, now unsure where he fit in. He spotted her, didn't smile, just approached like someone walking toward a closed door, hoping it might still open. Thanks for meeting me, he said, sliding into the seat across from her. Diane didn't say anything at first, just watched him. He looked down, adjusted the sleeve of his sweater, then folded his hands together. I wasn't sure if you would. I almost didn't, she replied. He nodded. Fair. They sat in silence for a moment. The waitress came by and Jason waved off the menu. Just water. When they were alone again, he leaned back. I messed up. Diane didn't flinch. I know that doesn't fix anything, he continued, voice low, but I needed to say it, out loud, to someone who matters. Another beat of silence. I got caught up, he said. In the politics, the performance, all of it. Somewhere along the line, I stopped seeing the people around me and only saw the game, the status, the fight. He looked at her, not challenging, not begging, just tired. You don't have to believe me. Hell, I don't know if I believe myself half the time. But when I saw that board vote go through, when I read the audit findings with my own signature at the bottom, I didn't even recognize who I was. Diane stirred her tea slowly, the spoon tapping lightly against porcelain. I guess I thought if I showed up like this, no defenses, no spin, you'd understand. She set the spoon down, finally looked him in the eye. I do understand, she said, but understanding isn't the same as permission. Jason's jaw tightened, not in anger, more like restraint. Do you hate me? No, Diane said, quiet but firm. I don't. He exhaled, just barely. But I don't owe you anything anymore, she added. Not my understanding, not my forgiveness, and definitely not my silence. Jason nodded slowly, as if each word hit harder than the last. I know you're rebuilding everything, he said, voice slightly hoarse. They said Caleb's interim CFO, that you opened the mentorship program. I saw the press release. It's not about rebuilding, she said. It's about making sure no one like you gets the keys again. That one landed. Jason looked down at his hands. I wanted to say it. That I know. That I see it now. Even if it's too late. Diane tilted her head. It is too late. But that doesn't mean you can't learn from it. Just not with me. A long, loaded pause. The soft clatter of a spoon at another table. Someone coughing near the counter. Jason stood slowly. Take care of yourself, Diane. I already do. He gave her one final look, something between apology and loss, then left. No drama, no slammed doors. Just the quiet sound of footsteps fading. She stayed a few minutes longer, finished her tea, watched the light stretch across the floor, then reached into her purse and pulled out her notepad, the one with legacy written across the top. Below it, she wrote January, internal audit training, junior team, February, community finance seminar, pilot program March, speaker series, first gen voices in leadership. She closed the notebook and smiled. The receipt came through just after sunrise. Donation confirmed, $10,000 to Haven Bridge Housing Fund in support of transitional housing for single mothers and their children. Diane read it once, then archived the email. She didn't post about it, didn't mention it to anyone at brunch, didn't sign her name publicly. She didn't need credit. She just wanted the world to be a little softer for someone who might never know her name. At 10 a.m., she was standing in the back lot of St. Teresa's Community Center, helping load boxes of canned goods into the back of a truck labeled Holiday Drive Final Round. Her gloves were too thin, her coat not warm enough, but the cold didn't bite the way it used to. Caleb showed up with coffee for the volunteers and a Santa hat that somehow looked dignified on him. Margot brought 6 dozen granola bars for the road. Sharon spent 15 minutes debating with a teenager about whether stuffing belonged in a box or a casserole dish. No one mentioned work. No one mentioned Jason. It was just people, doing good, together. That night, Diane's home smelled like roasted rosemary chicken, garlic mashed potatoes, and mulled wine. The table was modest. 6 seats, gold-rimmed plates she'd owned since before she took the executive job, wax-dripped candlesticks, cloth napkins folded like it was instinct, not effort. Sharon brought a salad with pomegranate seeds and something she claimed was a very specific citrus vinaigrette. Caleb brought his dog in a sweater that said "Slay all day." Margot brought pie and the last bottle of her ex's bourbon, saying, "We're drinking this out of spite and gratitude." Diane didn't cook for show. She cooked like someone who remembered what it felt like to eat alone. They ate too much, laughed too loud, argued over whether Love Actually was a classic or just British nonsense with sweaters. At one point, Diane left the table to flip the record. Her husband's collection, old jazz, Christmas crooners, that one Nina Simone album they'd played every year since their first tree. The vinyl spun softly through the room. "Who is this?" Caleb asked. "Nina," Diane said, pouring wine. He loved her voice. Said it felt like velvet you weren't allowed to touch. Sharon leaned back in her chair, watching Diane carefully. "You okay?" Diane smiled. "I'm still figuring out what that means. But yes." Margot raised her glass. "To women who don't burn down bridges, they build better ones over them." Glasses clinked. The dog barked once, like a toast. Much later, after the table had been cleared and the last candle had burned low, Diane stood alone by the window. Snow again, light and slow, like a whisper across the glass. She could still hear the record spinning faintly in the background, the needle soft as a breath. She wasn't thinking about Jason. She wasn't thinking about the audit. She was thinking about how this moment, this warmth, this stillness, would have felt impossible a year ago, when everything was tight and gray and sharp, when she lived under the weight of silence and half smiles and strategic restraint. Now she breathed without bracing for impact. She picked up her phone, scrolled. Saw another Instagram post from Heather, this one a black and white of her own reflection in a department store window, captioned, "Some people think silence is peace. It's not. It's just what's left when no one cares anymore." Diane didn't screenshot it, didn't roll her eyes, didn't care. She just locked her phone, set it aside, and reached instead for the album cover, fingertips brushing the edges of that familiar, worn sleeve. Outside, the streetlights glowed soft. Inside, the house hummed with the kind of quiet that wasn't lonely at all. The snow fell slow and sugar-fine, blanketing the streets in a quiet that felt almost rehearsed. Diane walked the 10 blocks to the office instead of driving. No headphones, no calls, just the hush of tires gliding by, boots on wet concrete, the occasional flurry caught in the seams of her scarf. The city hadn't woken up fully yet, but she had. Not for anyone, for herself. The building lobby was still dim when she pushed through the glass doors. Security waved. She waved back. Upstairs, the elevator hummed open to the newly painted executive floor. Eggshell walls, warm light, no gold accents, no brass plaques. She unlocked her office. Inside, it smelled faintly of cedar and citrus oil. Sharon's doing, no doubt. A small handwritten card sat on her desk in looping cursive. "You built the kind of place we want to stay. So we brought breakfast." Underneath, S, C, and M. Diane smiled, then reached into her coat pocket and pulled out the object she'd been carrying since the morning. The snow globe. It had been a gift from her late husband, years ago. A small, delicate thing. A tiny brass office chair inside a swirl of glass, surrounded by falling silver flakes. She used to keep it tucked in the back corner of a bookshelf, unsure if it belonged at home or at work. Today, it belonged here. She placed it gently in the center of her desk, not to showcase it, to honor it, a symbol of survival, of staying. The kitchen down the hall buzzed with familiar chaos. Caleb was fiddling with the coffee machine's settings like it was a satellite launch. Margot was carving up cinnamon rolls with a penknife. Sharon leaned against the wall, stirring oat milk into her thermos with a metal straw she claimed was government grade. "Tell me that smell isn't illegal," Diane said, stepping into the doorway. "Fresh batch," Sharon said, holding up the tray. "No raisins. We've matured as a culture." Caleb slid over, grinning. "Also, I brought projections." He pulled a manila folder from his backpack, the same bag he used when he was an intern. It was stained at the corner with something that looked suspiciously like Thai curry. He opened the folder on the counter like it was a magic trick. "Q1 estimates," he said, "and before you ask, yes, those numbers are real. We're growing." Diane scanned the top sheet. He wasn't exaggerating. The numbers weren't just healthy, they were accelerating. Engagement, revenue, retention. Not legacy numbers, momentum numbers. "You did this," she said. "We did this," he corrected. Margot handed her a cinnamon roll on a napkin shaped like a snowflake. "What are you going to do with your share of the success?" Diane thought for a moment, then smiled. "Host a benefit," she said. "Spring. Scholarships, sponsorships. Something no one can spin into ego or punishment." "Can we have a band?" Sharon asked. "You pick the band," Diane said. "I'll pick the donors." By noon, the office was alive. No fanfare, no dress codes, just energy. Safe energy. The kind people grow inside. Diane stood by her window, sipping coffee from her company Santa mug, the cinnamon roll half-eaten on her desk, the snow globe catching the light in slow, silver swirls. Outside, the storm was quiet but constant. Inside, it was warm, not perfect, but good. She picked up her pen and opened her notepad. One final entry for the year. Spring Benefit Gala. Theme TBD. Caleb. Promotion pathway? Full. Mentorship group. Add 3 new mentees. Review maternity leave extensions proposal. Board. Restructure bonus approval into committee vote. She smiled at the last one. Legacy. In ink. Policy. In practice. And peace. Permanent now, not a performance. The clock ticked toward 5. Her team had left a little early. Promises of hot chocolate and last-minute shopping and a group dinner, Sharon refused to label a tradition yet. Diane stayed behind, letting the office quiet itself naturally. She flipped off the lights one at a time, paused at the snow globe, tapped it gently. The flakes swirled, soft and steady. Her phone buzzed. A memory notification. Photo from 2 years ago. Jason, wearing a Santa tie, fake smile frozen in front of the tree they made the interns decorate. She stared at it for a beat, then deleted it. No fanfare, no ceremony, just gone. Outside, snow danced beneath the streetlights like a secret. Inside, Diane zipped her coat, pulled on her gloves, and locked the door behind her. And for the first time in years, the final thought she carried into the night wasn't about strategy or defense or regret. It was this: he canceled me for Christmas, so I canceled his bonus and gave myself the gift of peace.